Hi, I'm Ferrie from Toilet Training Educators. Toilet training is one of the big three. It sits with sleep and eating as one of the things that I think parents feel the most challenged about. So it's really important to have a plan that you can work to, or some resources that you can use to help you and your child get through toilet training. Let's talk about how toilet training actually works. So it's a skill that needs to be developed. It's not something that a child will suddenly know how to do. It's something that each of us needs to learn. And as we learn everything, toilet training needs to be thought about in the same way. All of us learn best without stress and without pressure. So that's a really important thing to bring to toilet training. In the first instance, when we start, and we can start as early as we like in thinking about toilet training, because what we know is the first thing that happens when we start to learn is we model. So we watch and we take our cues from what we see. So a young child, from the time they're a baby, is learning about whether the toilet is dirty and yucky and stinky and germy and all of those adjectives that we often use. But a child takes from that maybe the toilet isn't such a great place to be. So our language is really important right from the start. So is our actions. So we can go into the toilet and close the door, and a child is kind of thinking, well, there's some secret parents' business going on in there. We want them to feel that toileting is really normal. It's something that everybody needs to do. So let them watch. Let them be part of the experience. And if a child does want to touch the toilet, and of course they're curious, they're interested, so that's okay, but we would want them to wash their hands rather than respond in a way that suggests there's something negative about them touching the toilet. When your child then starts to get a bit curious, and you'll know when that is, they're starting to follow you in, they're really watching carefully, and they're rolling the toilet paper off the toilet roll and wanting to hand it to you, and you're kind of thinking, gee, I'd really like this to be a private process, but it's not. So it is important to let the child be curious, and if they're verbal and asking you questions, to explain. So if they want to know where it's going to the poo farm, or it's going to wherever you want to say it's going to, but kids need explanations if they're asking those questions. That second stage is also a time where you will start to see signs of readiness. And it's usually around, for girls, about 18 months, and for boys around 2. So at this stage, boys are generally a little bit developmentally later than girls. That is also supported by research. The research actually says that the best time to start toilet training is between around 19 months to 24 months. And when we're talking about starting, we're actually talking about the familiarisation that I mentioned in stage 1, where they're modelling, and stage 2, where they're becoming curious. And then we're going to start actively training, which we need to do. But it's interesting to understand that historically, so 20 years ago, 88% of kids were toilet trained before the age of 3. So now that percentage is much, much lower. And that's nothing to do with the kids. That's actually about decisions that parents are making with the information that you've had. So it's good to know that, because it suggests that when a child is showing readiness, as we would expect, sometime between 19 months and 24 months, then it's okay to start. And all the research says that if you start around that time, it should be easier, and that's important for you. It should be easier to toilet train the child. So all the suggestions that say the longer you wait, the easier it will be, there's no evidence that supports that. So that's good to know. It certainly doesn't mean that it can't happen and it won't be okay. But research suggests the earlier you start, the easier it will be. So you've got a curious child who's showing signs of readiness. And those signs of readiness will look like probably some familiar things. So that's when a child starts to go and hide. And they might be sneaking off and hiding under the dining table or hiding behind the couch. Those places seem to be hiding places of choice for lots of toddlers. And that tells us that the child is actually getting signals from their body and are then taking action. Now, they don't understand that that's what's happening, but it tells us that their body is allowing them to be able to recognise that there is a trigger and they need to take some action. You can help them when you see that. So if a child or your child is heading off to hide, you can say to them, I can see you going to hide, you need a poo. So that helps them to actually start putting those two things together. I should have said at the start as well, I'm going to say wee and poo a fair bit during this presentation, and that's because you need language around toilet training that your kids understand. So sometimes we find ourselves whispering about number twos and other words we have for it. Whatever words you've got for it, that's okay, but don't make it secretive. So poo and wee are easily understood by kids, so they're good words to use. Other things that I'd just like to mention around language is adult concepts like you're going to be a big boy or a big girl when you're toilet trained. Lots of kids don't want to be big, and linking things like that to toilet training creates pressure. It's like, you can't go and stay at a friend's place if you can't use the toilet. That's a really hard thing for a child to link those two things together and say, hey, that's just, unless you're toilet trained, that's just not on. You can't live a life like you want to live. So it's the language we use is important. We talking about smelly, stinky, gross, all those other words too, we want to leave those out because they create negative connotations too. So a child does a poo, it's time for a clean up. Come on, let's go and have a clean up. Your child will take your cues from you. So that's another reason that language is a critical part of what you bring to their toilet training. I should have actually said as well that we need some things from the child when it comes to being ready for toilet training. So we need a child to be able to hold a good amount of wee, and a good amount of wee is about, you can't go about measuring it, but it is about a cup and a half. But we can measure it in time. So we need them to be able to hold on for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, because bladder capacity is important. And the bladder's a muscle, so we actually need it to fill and stretch and then be emptied. So we don't want a child who's going to the bathroom like every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes, with parents taking them so that they can try for a wee. It's really important that the bladder develops capacity. We also need soft poo because hard poo creates fear for a child. It can be really hard to get a hard poo out. So we want soft poo, and if poo isn't soft, then we would up the fluid intake. So we want a child to drink lots because that's good for poo and it's good for wee. So lots of water, five cups a day is a really important part of getting your child ready for toilet training. It's great if they recognise the triggers, so if they are going off to hide, but if they're not, that's okay if we're still seeing those other signs and recognising that their bodies are ready through capacity. Now we're up to the training, so it's time to start. And it's really important that parents recognise that action has to be taken. So, and what that means is that you do need to take the nappy off, but there's no evidence to say you must take it off all the time and leave it off. In fact, we would really say, please put a nappy on when you go out. Put a nappy on in unfamiliar places. Take the pressure off the child and take the pressure off yourselves about the trauma of an accident in the supermarket or at a friend's place. So put a nappy on when you go out, when you start. Like when we learn, we need time to process and to get feedback about accidents, about things that we're not doing well and things we are doing well. So that's what a child needs too. So if you put the nappy back on, that time can then be used for the child to process the learning that they've had in place. So take the nappy off at a regular time if you can. So routine is important in learning. So take it off for a couple of hours every morning. Morning's the best time often for kids. So take the nappy off during that time and then put it back on when you put the child to bed for their lunchtime nap. And if you've had some accidents or you're over it for the day, that's okay. Put a nappy on for the afternoon and try again tomorrow. If that's not working for you, the routine-wise to do it in the morning, start at the weekends. And when you feel that there's a bit of, oh yeah, I can see that this is working for my child, then talk to childcare about it if your child's in childcare and get them to work with the same kind of routine. Or if they're going to their grandparents or some other carer, get them to work with the routine that you're looking to put in place. Most important thing is to take the pressure off here. So routine and repetition, they're important concepts for learning. The other thing that we want to do during this trial stage is ensure that we've got the right equipment for the child to use. So we want to have, for pooing, position is really important. So to poo, we need to have our feet planted. So you need either a potty, particularly if kids are really little, potties can be really great. But if you don't want to use potties, perfectly fine, but you need a step or you need one of those steps with the toilet seat that goes over the toilet that your child can firmly plant their feet on. That's important physically because that's the correct and easiest position to actually get poo out. So we want feet planted so that the anal rectal canal is open and we can release that poo so a child can get that poo out more easily than if they were not in that position. So we also need something that makes the toilet seat smaller, because for a little child with a little bottom, a big hole, that can be quite fearful as well. So we want something that makes that toilet seat smaller so that the child feels more comfortable. So it's also really important during this training stage that we take the child for a try. Now, if you've got a 2, 3, 4-year-old and you say to a child, do you want to go to the toilet? The answer to that is always going to be no. So it's time for a try. We want to change the language so that there isn't a yes or no answer here. Strong-willed children, you might want to give options. Do you want to have a try now or do you want to have a try in 5 minutes? But it isn't about, do you need to go to the toilet? So we want to take a child for a try every 1.5 to 2 hours. If your child is feeling weeing every 1.25 hours, that's okay. More frequently than that, you would up their fluid intake, see if we can build their bladder capacity and move to that 1.5 to 2 hour time frame. So that's really important, because as we move into stage 4, which is the stage where a child will start to consciously move from needing to think about what to do when they recognise signs from their body that they need to go, to an automatic response. Same as you and I, where our body triggers us and we don't think about, okay, well, the first thing I need to do is find a toilet, and then I need to find which one I'm going to go in, and then I need to take my pants, blah, blah. We don't need to do that anymore. But during a conscious training phase, we need to do that. And that's where your child's at in stage 3, and they will then automatically be able to do it for themselves. So my final tips are just take the pressure off. Accidents will happen, and that's okay. All of us will make mistakes when we're learning something new. And when that happens, that's an opportunity for us to learn, well, that didn't go the way that I wanted it to, so how do I do it differently? Your child's doing that when they're having their accidents. Normalise it as much as possible, take the stress out, and be really positive. Expect success. It will come, and your child will toilet train and then move on to a whole lifetime of new skills for them to develop.